In continuation of our review of the coaching staff, let's break down Brian Sweeney's time in Kansas City. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering how this channel works, I bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes in length. And for our Friday episode, we do a mailbag episode in its entirety, where any question you ask, I will answer in that 30-minute time frame. So if you want to be included, leave a comment below on this video, title it Mailbag Friday, or you can reach out to me on Twitter a little bit later on in the day. Before we get started, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Last night's episode was dedicated to Matt Quatraro, reviewing him after 3 years in Kansas City, the pros of what he's done, the cons of what he's done, and what we expect moving forward from him. And I do plan on probably lumping this segment together with maybe all of the pitching coaches here. I know I titled it Brian Sweeney, but I do want to lump the other guys in as well with Zach Bove and Mitch Stetter, because they deserve their flowers in this segment for the wonderful things they've done for this pitching staff. And when it comes to Brian Sweeney, I believe when you are a pitching coach, you might be more hands-on than maybe any other coach on the staff. I mean, when you really think about it, I feel that the pitching coach, is working tirelessly with the starter that day. The bullpen coaches are working with the bullpen guys every single day. Where hitting coaches, yes, you absolutely are working with these guys, but on a day-to-day basis, right, you might pick out one hitter for that lineup, or you might have multiple guys you're working with. But with Brian Sweeney, each and every day you're working with the starter of that day, right? You're throwing a bullpen, you're seeing how things are going, you're working with the catchers. I've always felt that you're more hands-on. And the good pitching coaches out there, you'll really see the results when the staff is doing well, and you'll definitely see the results if the hands-on approach isn't working and your staff as a whole has bad numbers. They have terrible numbers. And we saw plenty of that in the era under Mike Matheny with Cal Eldred. I mean, none of the young pitchers really progressed that well. His biggest success story was Brad Keller, and that was about it, because then Brad Keller torpedoed toward the end of his time in Kansas City and then picked things back up, of course, this year with the Chicago Cubs as a setup guy. But with Sweeney, you really see it in a bunch of guys with this rotation and with this bullpen. And I will go on record to say that this turnaround for Kansas City, yes, has to do with Bobby Witt Jr. finding his own. Vinny Pasquantino, Michael Garcia kind of coming into their own. But yes, the easy thing to say is, well, the pitching staff has done a great job of making this team more competitive. But I'm not sure that we would have seen the exact same results, especially from the younger guys, if they were not being coached by Brian Sweeney, Zach Bove, and Mitch Stetter. I believe those guys have done a tremendous job in relating to these pitchers, helping them out, identifying new pitches, identifying issues when they are struggling, and fixing them rather quickly. And now when you watch the Royals call up somebody or they trade for somebody, you get a different feel from it. Where in the past, if the Royals traded away somebody or they released somebody and they caught on elsewhere, it was just obvious, right? They just needed to get out of Kansas City. They needed to go find better coaches to work with, a better environment that was more tailor-made for them. And Brian Sweeney has made this environment really tailor-made for a bunch of arms and making it more enticing, more intriguing for free agents to come here. And when you see that immediate success, yes, you do want to be a successful pitcher, but maybe for some guys out there, it's, I want to go to Kansas City and, get those big time numbers so that I can make big time money, whether that be with the Royals or that be with other teams out there, right? With Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha coming over later in their career, having the seasons they've put in, that does resonate with the rest of the league. And if you're a young pitcher, I'd imagine Ryan Bergert and Stephen Kolek had this same thought when coming over, because they saw what Cole Reagans was able to do. They saw what Chris Bubich was able to do in the first half of the season, and maybe thought to themselves, they can do the same with me. And I'm not sure there's been a more influential coach on this staff than Brian Sweeney in changing the culture, changing the identity of the Royals. For so many years, you didn't really talk much about the Royals pitching staff. There were the years in 2014 and 15 where you had your guys. You had your guys that were serviceable arms. James Shields was your inning eater, your true number one. Yorgano Ventura was the lights out flamethrower. Edinson Volquez, steady Eddie. You had Chris Young. You had Danny Duffy. The list goes on and on and on, right? They had their collection of guys that were good pitchers, but I'm not sure that you looked at the Royals and said, oh, that's where pitchers go to excel. We always viewed it that way in Tampa Bay. We viewed that in Cleveland. And to no surprise to anybody out there, that's where Matt Quatrero and Paul Hoover came from in Tampa Bay. Brian Sweeney came from Cleveland. Zach Bove came from Minnesota, who had had their collection of arms that had really excelled. And now the Royals have these bright minds in the pitching department that can work with numerous guys. And it's not they have to have the same arsenals. It's not a situation where the Royals always ditch a certain pitch and they give them a new one. It kind of is just based on what that pitcher is and what they might become. You might have a right-hander come in that has an average curveball and you say, let's cut that out and let's go with the cutter, right? Or maybe you've got a power changeup. Let's use that a little bit more. Where I thought in the past, in the previous regime, it was more so about, well, we want to have an abundance of pitches so that the hitter's always on their toe. One of the best things I heard from a pitching coach of old, not necessarily at the Royals, just a pitching coach in my past, was that he said it's much better to have 2 elite pitches than 4 to 5 mediocre pitches, right? You see some of the best in the world, right? We can always remember with Mariano Rivera, he had that cutter, right? And that was the pitch that he went to over and over and over again. Kenley Jansen, same thing. I know I'm using cutter a lot in this segment, but he's somebody that threw that cutter and threw the heck out of it, right? So with the Royals, I feel they have started to work more in that direction. And really it started when Brian Sweeney got here. We just didn't see the results until 2024. You got more stability. You got more veteran arms. Those younger guys were able to look to them, maybe bounce some ideas off of them. But now you go into each and every year expecting the Royals to have a top 5 rotation in all of baseball. At least I do. Now they're going to have the depth and the bullpen taking a big step forward. I got to credit Mitch Stetter and company in that. They turned some guys we weren't really talking about a year ago into some pretty reliable arms. I go into 2026 expecting Steven Cruz to be a dominant force in that bullpen. I expect Luinder Avila to have some role in that bullpen and pitching some high leverage spots. Jonathan Bowen, exact same thing. Daniel Lynch figuring himself out. Angel Serpa figuring himself out a little bit. And not all of them have put together all-star level numbers. But when you raise the floor of a pitcher on your roster, you can start to creep into those top categories. The only thing they're really lacking in terms of being a elite number 1 top of the line pitching staff is they don't strike out as many guys. That is important. Yes, you can run your pitch count up, but if you are that big time strikeout rotation or a heavy, hard throwing back end of the bullpen that can mow through the middle of the order all on strikeouts, that's what can really separate you. But we've gone through year to year looking at the Royals and their pitching staff and how they started as a group that couldn't throw strikes. They walked a lot of people, dealt with a lot of base runners, had a high ERA, didn't work that deep in the game. So you started at the bottom. You started bare minimum. And I even said that's bare minimum. That's well below the bare minimum. 2024, this team threw more strikes. Of course, they lowered the ERA. They worked deeper into ball games. You had a 200 inning guy. You had a 200 strikeout guy. The bullpen fell behind a little bit. And this year, it more so exploited the lack of depth, right? So now the next step into this Brian Sweeney era, the Zach Bove, Mitch Stetter era, I would say it's to keep all those things intact. You don't need to be the strikeout team, but you want to see them work deep into games. You want to see them limit the walks. You want your bullpen to be reliable, of course, but I would say to really have that depth, you got to have 7 to 8 guys in that rotation, or at least waiting to throw in that rotation, that can log you some innings this year. Not that you're counting on injuries. You just have to be prepared for them. And to me, that would be the next step for this group. But I feel that Brian Sweeney and company, they've changed how people perceive this organization. Now, when a pitcher goes to Kansas City, you almost expect them to start throwing well, depending on where they came from. And that wouldn't have been possible without Brian Sweeney, Zach Bove, and Mitch Stetter. Do you believe Brian Sweeney's the one that's changed the Royals culture? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, read an article on MLB.com about 30 free agents that will set the market. Only one player was seen as a potential fit for the Royals. Who was that guy, and does he make sense for Kansas City? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you download your podcast. Want to tell you about our title sponsor today in FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. For my pick, I'm going to look at the Sunflower Showdown in Lawrence between Kansas and Kansas State. I expect this to be a close game. Right now, the spread's 3 points in favor of the Jayhawks. I'm just going to take the over in this game. I expect it to be a shootout. I expect it to be a lot of fun. I believe it's supposed to be good weather, a little bit chilly for the fall, but it should be another fantastic matchup between KU and K-State. The Sunflower Showdown this Saturday at 11 a.m. There are a few articles that get posted like this throughout the offseason, and sometimes they start to ramp it up in numbers when the World Series comes to a close. And we previewed the World Series a little bit in our final segment last night, so we probably won't talk any more about it until it's wrapped up. But I read this article from Mark Feinstein, did it on MLB.com, about the 30 free agents that will set the market. Some guys, immediately scrolling through the list, I thought would be good fits for the Royals, but Mark Feinstein didn't think so. There's only 3 teams that he would pick for each potential fit. And so as I'm scrolling, you get through the pitchers, you get through the back-end bullpen arms. I knew that the Royals were not going to be seen as fits for them, because I would go into this offseason not expecting the Royals to spend any sort of money on a reliever or on a starter. Maybe a 1-year, $2 million deal, maybe a minor league deal, but they have a lot of arms in that bullpen. They have a lot of arms in that rotation. All of that focus, all of that, financial stuff needs to be put toward hitting, needs to be put toward the offense and corner outfield bats. I finally get down to Trent Grisham, center fielder for the New York Yankees, coming off a 34 home run season. He had an OPS plus that was 25 points above the league average, had a 3.5 WAR season. That was a huge step forward from what he did the last 2 years at the end of his time in San Diego, and then also his first year in New York. And he's going to be going into this offseason looking for a multi-year deal. He's only 28 years old. Want to say that he'll turn 29 early on next year. And the Royals might be one of those teams looking to bring in a bat like that. There are some immediate cons to this. Number one, when you have players that are coming off of a career year, but the previous 2 were well below average, you might be a little bit more hesitant on giving him that 3-year deal. If it was a 1-year deal, no harm, no foul. But if you're Trent Grisham, you're coming off a 34 home run season, you're looking to cash in somewhere. And he's never really been known as a power hitter. He pretty much hovered right around 15 to 20 home runs in his good years, and then he hit 34, and it's no surprise that came at Yankee Stadium. A couple of the balls that would have been flyouts in a lot of ballparks, they found the first couple rows of seats at Yankee Stadium. Still, 34 home runs is going to look good on a box score. It's going to look good when you're negotiating for contracts, and that's what he's going to try to leverage. He also can play 3 outfield spots. He played a lot of center field in New York. The Yankees are also going to be going into this offseason trying to make a huge splash. Yet again, that's always going to be a theme in this offseason. But whereas we talked about Cody Bellinger in our episode on Tuesday, how maybe they look at Kyle Tucker and they want to bring Kyle Tucker in, who may view Yankee Stadium as a perfect spot for him to have a 40 home run season, 50 home run season. He's certainly got the pop for it. But if they put their focus on Kyle Tucker, that could leave Cody Bellinger in that area of maybe you would try to strike a deal there if he's not going back to the Yankees. Or to fit my narrative of this Grisham segment, they put their focus on Cody Bellinger and say, we got to bring him back. We got to make him our center fielder. And then here comes Trent Grisham into more of an affordable price range. That's where the Royals could strike. The average is not going to jump off the page. He hit 235. Want to say he got on base a little bit over 330. I don't have his stats in front of me. I probably should have done that, but I have the article in front of me. So with Trent Grisham, I feel he would be categorized as a medium-sized fish. You've heard me say the term big fish, right? To make a big splash. Trent Grisham, I believe, is a medium-sized fish because if he does give you maybe 85% of what he gave the Yankees last year, that's still a tremendous upgrade in the outfield over what you've had the last couple of years. But that necessarily can't be the focus. That can't be your baseline. Well, we have to have somebody that can hit over 200. No, that's not going to significantly improve your lineup. And the 34 home runs at Yankee Stadium or the 34 home runs on the year while playing for the Yankees, we all know that's not translating to Kauffman Stadium. That 34 might be 22, which still I feel would be fine. I would take 22 home runs from a corner outfield bat and an OPS plus that's 20 points above league average. I would take that, all day long. There would never be a time that I wouldn't take that. But on the flip side, which is why I would categorize him as a medium-sized fish, the 2 previous years he hit sub 200, he got on base sub 300, and the power wasn't really there. And his defense, even though he's a very smooth defender, he's not the defender that he once was when he was pretty much that 4th outfielder in San Diego and that 4th outfielder with the Brewers. Now he's going to try and, showcase both parts of his abilities, right? And trying to get this contract that he's no longer just the defense first guy. He's also, improved a lot offensively. The guys I thought of, though, with years like this and the 2 previous ones not being as great. The first one, of course, was Tyler O'Neill. Tyler O'Neill last year or 2 years ago in Boston, 30-plus home run season. He was one of my top targets in free agency. Thought he'd be affordable. I want to say it came in around 15-ish million a year. But then he gets around that type and then plays for Baltimore. Starts the year decently well. Still was showcasing that power despite having a massive change in hitting to left field where he had the green monster. And then you go to that cavernous left field at Camden Yards. But he was never healthy. Battled injuries all year long, tried to come back one time, but the numbers weren't there. It was just a very poor year one for Tyler O'Neill. And he was one of those guys where the numbers weren't that great, really popped, might have been helped out by the ballpark he was playing in, and the Orioles on the hook for a large sum of money over the next couple of years. And he might even be a trade candidate this deadline if the Orioles are out of it and they try to move on from him and try to have somebody else take on that salary. With Grisham, there's always that risk where you look at those numbers and I'm paying for what you did last year. That's free agency to a T. You are paying for the numbers they put up last year. And if you have those 5 to 6 year deals, you, of course, are trying to look to the future and if they can replicate that or if they can give you 3 years of that production or 4 years. And with Grisham, my guess is he's going to look in the ballpark of a 3 to 4 year deal. That just without looking at any of the Spotrac stuff, without looking at any of the free agent predictions, I'd imagine he comes in around that. And the Royals could turn to that and say, hey, we want to jump on the market. We feel that he absolutely can handle one of the corner outfield spots in Kansas City. His bat can still play up at Kauffman Stadium. Maybe some of those home runs can turn into doubles. They certainly did that with Andrew Benintendi and acquiring him. They thought, well, we don't need the home runs, but we'll take the gap-to-gap doubles hitter that he used to be. But with Grisham, it feels like a bigger risk compared to what some of these other guys might go for. Because to look at those numbers in 2024 and 2023, you pay him that money and he puts up that, you're going to be regretting that for a long, long time. Still, maybe he did figure out something. Maybe he tapped into something, or maybe it was that he was hitting in a lineup with Aaron Judge and Cody Bellinger. You could also say the same thing the year before that. He was in a lineup with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. But he did battle some injuries, I believe, in 2024, and want to say he did the same thing in 2023. Do you believe Trent Grisham would be a good fit for the Royals? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. When we come back, we will wrap up our show with 4 Royals being named as Silver Slugger finalists. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Want to tell you about 2 sponsors, beginning with Rugiet. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnMLB so they know that we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Also want to tell you about PrizePicks. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LockedOnMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LockedOnMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. The Silver Slugger Awards will be announced a little bit later on in the offseason, but the Royals do have 4 players that are finalists out there. To no surprise, it's Salvador Perez behind the plate, it's Bobby Witt Jr. at short, it's Vinny Pasquantino at first, and it is Maikel Garcia at third. Now, in the meantime, while I was rattling off some of the ad reads there, I was trying to see where the other announcements had been made. I was checking on the MLB Twitter account because they did that yesterday for the National League, but I haven't seen anything yet for the American League. I would imagine that the usual suspects should be the Silver Slugger finalist at first base. Vinny's going to have a really good chance to earn that recognition. He's also a correspondent for the World Series coming up here in a few days. Or actually, I believe tonight should be game 1. I've gotten my days mixed up. This has been a pretty chaotic week here, but I'm pretty sure game 1 is tonight. Actually, it's not. It's Friday. So, yeah, still getting my days mixed up. But Vinny Pasquantino, Lawrence Butler, and Brent Rooker, I believe, are going to be reporters, basically, for the broadcasting crew for the World Series. So more exposure for the Royals. Vinny, of course, deserves that recognition for a 30-plus home run season, 100-plus RBI year. But we know Vladdy Jr. is going to win that award. Vladdy Jr. is probably going to be the Silver Slugger winner at first base. Behind the plate, Cal Raleigh should win that. Again, I don't have the award finalists in front of me. I am assuming, and it feels like a pretty good assumption, that these are going to be other finalists, and they're probably going to win the award. At third base for the American League, going to be Jose Ramirez. And then at shortstop, I'd imagine Bobby Witt Jr. is going to have a good chance. I thought that too with the All-Star game, and then Jacob Wilson got the nod. Zach Neto, of course, who actually just signed on to a new agency this morning. He's another guy that can get some votes there. But for the other 3, unfortunately, as great of seasons as they had other guys at that position that had historic seasons or just incredibly good years. Vladdy Jr., we are recognizing his greatness more so in the postseason, but he was still awfully good in the regular season. Cal Raleigh, need I say more? 60-plus home runs as a catcher. I'm not even sure we need to do a vote there. We all know that Cal Raleigh's going to win that award. And J-Rom over at third base, Michael closed the gap a little bit, and that gap was quite large going into the year because Michael had never had a season like he did in 2025. But Jose Ramirez is still that guy over at third base. He still is that top third baseman and maybe one of the more underrated players in all of baseball. At shortstop, though, that's where I feel that Bobby Witt Jr. could bring home the hardware. Just because his American League competition, I didn't believe had that great of a second half. Bobby Witt Jr. didn't have the same second half that he did in 2024, which I fully expected him to have. I thought that, him getting snubbed yet again in the All-Star game was going to fuel him to hit 340 in the second half. He was going to be the top hitter. And we always do this with Bobby because when he doesn't hit 340 or 330, it's like, oh, he must be slumping, right? Oh, I don't remember him being as good in the second half, right? Well, he still hit north of 290. And when you have that expectation set, when that is the standard, it can be tough to live up to a little bit. But it's wild that the year he put in 2024, we could technically categorize it as a down year for Bobby Witt Jr. because of what he did in the second half in 23, what he did in total in 2024. And if it wasn't for a Barry Bonds-esque year from Aaron Judge, he would have brought home the MVP award. Now, that's a big thing to address, right? You can't just remove Aaron Judge from baseball. What he did was extraordinary, but it just overshadowed one of the more unbelievable years from a shortstop that we've ever seen. It very much was reminiscent of the A-Rod years in Texas and in Seattle. That's what I got from Bobby Witt Jr. in 2024. In 2025, he's still put together one of the more successful seasons in Royals history, but it's not his standard. But I'm hoping that despite getting snubbed in the All-Star game, some people were fine with it because Jacob Wilson was hitting 350. But I would say that for the All-Star game, especially last year, we got away from put the best player in there, vote in the best player, because you had Javier Baez starting in center field. And though he was a great story this year, Byron Buxton should have been the starting center fielder and representing the Minnesota Twins. Bobby Witt Jr., of course, a biased point of view here, he should have been the starting shortstop because the last 2 years, he's been one of the best players in the sport, and he is yet to start in an All-Star game. Fingers crossed that can happen in 2026. I believe he's earned it. I believe that with all the accolades he's been putting together, people need to vote him in because he's one of the unicorns out there. He's not a unicorn like Shohei Ohtani, but he needs to start these All-Star games. He needs to start racking up a lot of these awards, and that goes even if he doesn't put together, or the team doesn't put together a playoff run, right? Because you need to recognize the player. You need to reward the player here. And with 4 finalists for the Silver Slugger Award, one of these Royals needs to bring it home. And unfortunately, the other 3 are heavily outmatched by their opponent or the multiple opponents they would be facing. With Bobby Witt Jr., unless I'm blanking on somebody, he needs to bring home that award. He needs to bring home a couple of more awards just because, the seasons like this, you can't take them for granted. If the Royals were more stable offensively, if they were more well-rounded, he would have had another chance to get to the postseason and erase the poor numbers that he had in 2024. But the good news is, even if you don't win it, you are recognized as a finalist, one of the top 3 offensive players at that position. And to have 4 of them, it shows you that for those guys, they deserve that praise. Those guys really did pop this year. I thought Vinny Pasquantino, Maikel Garcia had their true breakout years. Salvi shows he can still keep doing it. And Bobby Witt Jr. showing that he's probably going to be a finalist for that award 90% of his career. But we'll see if he brings home the hardware. Do you believe any of these Royals are going to be a Silver Slugger this year for the American League? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. That'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, it'll be a Mailbag Friday, so get your questions in. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.